Hey, what's up? Hello. I hope you all are doing well. It is that time of year. We are more than halfway through, so my quarter two wrap up is due. And I really like these quarterly wrap ups as opposed to a monthly wrap up. I find them a lot more feasible. There's just a bit more to talk about than there is to do them once per month or something, say, just based on the rate that I read. So I've been doing this for a couple years now, and I really have settled in to the idea, and I quite like it. So let's get started. So we're looking at between April and June of this year. To start off, I will share about Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I talked about this book recently in its own separate video. This is a fantasy book. It is. It's fine. I had a lot more to say about it there. Fantasy is not super my thing, and I don't know really if I could ever put together a rubric of what a fantasy book should have in it for me to really enjoy it, because it seems that I move the goalposts a little bit with every book. But this is about an orphan girl who discovers that she's got magic powers to save her entire region. I don't know if it's meant to be Russia. There's a lot that is taken from what it seems like the Russian language and used in the language that they have for the various parts of their society. So it's similar in that respect. I don't know, I just feel like it's a story that we've heard a bunch of times done in a not super way. I have the other two in this trilogy. I also have Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom that were all given to me by a friend. And at some point, I'll probably have to read through those and see what the deal is. Next was an audiobook that I listened to called The Wangs versus the World by Jade Chang, and we read this I think in May for my book club that I run at the library in May. And this is a book about an immigrant family who becomes incredibly wealthy in the United States, and then they lose all of it in the dot-com boom. It is about the family driving across the country with their two youngest children and dad, who's lost his whole company, and their stepmother, all the way to the middle of New York to go and live with the eldest daughter in the family, who still may have some of her money based on the way that the laws were written and what kind of money she's got in her name. And so they're trying to go and continue to make their life by living as a family and getting there as a family in a way that perhaps they never were when they really did live together in the same house. I talked about it a little bit deeper in my last video that I made about audiobooks that I really enjoyed, because I listened to this on audiobook, and I found having someone able to read both in Mandarin and also in English and pronounce words the way that they sound in the language that they are written was incredibly beneficial to me. It just brought me so much deeper into the story, and I have so much respect for recordings of audiobooks that are done by folks who can do that. The seeking out of people to read audiobooks who are bilingual or multilingual is so important, and it really changes the experience from just reading it on the page. I do think the story could have been maybe 100 pages shorter. A lot of stories could be 100 pages shorter, but mostly it was good. If you like a family saga, this book is definitely one to check out. I could totally see it also being made into a movie or a TV series, a short TV series. There's a lot of personalities going on here, and you'll never look at Ketchup quite the same way again once you read this book. Next is another audiobook that I just included in my last video that I have made about audiobooks, and that's The Office of Historical Corrections. This is a collection of short stories all about the Black American experience, and wow, is it incredible. The very last story in here, for which the book is named, A+++++++. Just very captivating. Each one is different. They all sit with you for different reasons. They're all incredibly resonant. If you are not a person who has the experience of being Black in the United States, I would highly recommend reading this book to find out about it. This is a great collection. Every story is read by a different voice, which is interesting. It helps you move from one story to the next, whereas sometimes short story collections will be all read by the same narrator, and this is not. So I appreciated that greatly about this too. I have more thoughts on it. You can go watch that video if you feel like it. This was a book I gave 5 stars to this year, and I think if you read it, you probably would too. And the last book I finished in this quarter was a piece of Swedish literature, which I have discovered I think I kind of like the style of a lot of Swedish literature, just from the 3 books that I have sort of dabbled at, including this one, which is called The Little Old Lady Who Broke All the Rules. This is the first in a 3-part series. This is a translation from the Swedish, and it is about a woman called Martha who is living in a retirement home, and a bunch of her friends who are also living there with her, and they used to be a singing group. They still love to sing. And then the plot of the book is that the retirement home actually treats them really poorly. So bad, in fact, that they watch prison documentaries on television and read books about murders and about prison, and they discover that they seem to think that prison would actually be a better deal than living in Diamond House, the retirement home that they are in. And so they set out to commit an art heist to get themselves sent to Swedish prison, because they believe that in Swedish prison they would be treated better than they are at the retirement home. And unfortunately, this group of elderly folks pull off the heist a little too well, and it winds up getting them deeply entangled with the police and a sector of the mafia, and a whole bunch of other nonsense ensues. And these 5 people are sort of like all over the country on ferry boats and in car chases, and really trying to make the point that the elderly are not as naive and not as childlike and not as innocent as everyone sort of believes that they are just on sight. They're trying to break down the stereotypes that we have about older folks. I thought this book was okay. I don't know if it was the translation or just I felt there was an unnecessary amount of dialogue in some areas, but there was sort of too much talking. The words of it felt sort of stunted. The syntax was stunted a little bit, and parts of it to me felt a little unbelievable. There was some pairing off of characters that was happening that I just didn't necessarily buy into. One of the folks that's in my book club brought up the fact that she felt that old folks in this book were infantilized. She felt that the characters were written as being too childlike, and as someone who is 80 years old herself, she did not appreciate that, and I can understand why. So it had mixed reviews. A lot of people thought that it was sort of a fun romp through Sweden and an interesting case, and there are certainly complex pieces to it. The story tangles up the mystery bit just a little too far for me, but there seems to be a really similar sort of cutting undertone in terms of humor. It's very snide, it's very sharp type of humor that's said and then immediately sort of glossed over with the boring almost. Kind of to me sounds like it's a Swedish type of thing, because I noticed that same style in Fredrik Backman's Anxious People, and I really liked it. So I liked that about this book. I don't know if that is a Swedish literature thing, but it's definitely a theme that I have seen developing amongst, I guess, these 2 Swedish authors that I have read. So obviously that will take deeper investigation, but this is a fun story if you're looking for like a wacky caper type of novel. Those are all the books that I finished in Q2. I also began the audiobook of A Man Called Uva by Fredrik Backman, same author as Anxious People, also Swedish, and I did not finish that one. I could not really get into it with the same energy that I did Anxious People, which I was expecting to. I liked it, but I did find it hard to concentrate on this audiobook in a way that I previously felt and haven't experienced in quite some time. That same tone that I was just talking about, that sharpness in humor that's immediately smoothed over, that comes into play here quite a bit, because Uva is a curmudgeonly old man who's really going through some mental health issues and internal struggles with loss and grief, and I think this is probably a really great book. I might try and finish it later on. I returned the audio to the library already, but perhaps I'll pick it up later. It just didn't grab me at the time. Perhaps it was a timing thing. We'll have to maybe give this another chance. I also tried to listen to a book called Oh, William by Elizabeth Strout. It really bothers me that there's no comma on this cover because of the way that she consistently repeats, "Oh, William," throughout this book. I think there should probably be a comma there to make that grammatically correct. This is, I think, the third book in a series, or at least the third book about the main character here, which I found interesting. I saw this come through in an email from Penguin Random House, and when it was marketed, I don't think there was mention that you needed to read other books in order to pick up the plot of what's going on, but this seems to be the last book in a line about this woman who's had a very difficult life, it sounds like, and she's going through the back end of a divorce with her ex-husband. So the divorce has happened, they've been divorced, and now he's sort of resurfaced with some needs that only she can fill. I really enjoyed this book. I think I was reading it at a time where it was not particularly happy and it was starting to get a little gloomy, and I didn't want to be feeling gloomy every day on my way to work as I listened to it. So I paused it. I would like to come back to it, and if I do finish it, I might try and read the other two books that fall in line with it that have come previously. So we'll see what happens. And lastly, as you can see, I'm still in the middle of The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. I began this in April, and I'm about that far through it, so just shy of being halfway. This is a great book. I've had to put it to the side, unfortunately, to get through some of my book club books, but I would love to finish this summer. I think it's just so good, really well told. I'm really excited to finish this. With my penchant for audiobooks just now, it's harder for me to pick up just a regular book, so hopefully I will return to this very soon. So those were the books involved in the second quarter of my year. Please let me know down in the comments if you've read any of them or have thoughts therein. I'd love to chat with you and hear more about it. There's a link probably for anything that you could want to know about us in the description. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having lovely weeks and lovely lives, and we will see you very soon.